The vast chamber of the Galactic Council stretched across what seemed like an eternity of polished obsidian. The circular hall, carved from a single asteroid of pure black stone, had stood for 3 centuries as the ultimate symbol of interstellar cooperation. Today, that symbol trembled on the edge of collapse. Ambassador Valdorian Zethar strode toward the central podium, his blue-tinged skin reflecting the artificial lights that accommodated the 47 different species assembled in the chamber. The Valdorian's natural bioluminescence pulsed with what those familiar with his species recognized as barely contained agitation. Behind him, representatives from across the known galaxy watched with a mixture of anticipation and dread. "The 300th standard year of the Council has come," Zethar announced, his voice translator projecting in the common language that all members understood. "And yet, we face an unprecedented crisis." His gaze swept across the chamber until it settled on the human delegation, a modest group compared to some of the more established species. Captain Jake Morrison sat calm and composed, flanked by Dr. Lisa Parker and 2 other human representatives. The human section was noticeably smaller than those allocated to founding members, situated in the outer ring where newer additions to the council were placed. "Humanity," Zethar continued, "joined our ranks a mere 50 standard years ago. We welcomed them, shared our knowledge, our star charts, our technological advances. We gave them access to council territory and resources." Several representatives nodded in agreement. The Thexian Chancellor, seated on his elevated platform, leaned forward slightly, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence, a sign of intense focus. Yet, in that short time, Zethar's voice hardened. Humans have expanded beyond their assigned territories in the Kepler sector. They've established no fewer than 11 major colonies and 37 outposts in regions explicitly designated as protected or reserved for future council development. Captain Morrison remained impassive, though Dr. Parker appeared to be making notes on her datapad. The humans had heard these accusations before. They were hardly new. "They have developed technologies without proper oversight, engaged in unsanctioned trade with non-council species, and repeatedly ignored warnings about their expansionist policies." Zethar paused, his bioluminescence flaring brightly. "The High Council has reached its decision." The chamber fell silent. Even the constant hum of life support systems catering to dozens of different atmospheric needs seemed to quiet in anticipation. Humanity has 30 standard days to withdraw from all unauthorized colonies, cease all exploratory, mining, and development operations beyond their assigned territories, and submit to a full review of their technological advancements. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Such demands were unprecedented in Council history. Failure to comply, Zethar's voice grew colder, will result in economic sanctions, political isolation, and, if necessary, military intervention. The Valdorian stepped back from the podium, clearly expecting the humans to immediately begin negotiations or plead for leniency. That was the way of the Council, a demand followed by compromise, eventually reaching a solution that maintained the appearance of Council authority while allowing the offending party some concessions. Captain Morrison rose slowly from his seat. At 45 standard years, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had navigated both diplomatic receptions and combat situations with equal skill. He approached the central speaking area, nodded respectfully to the Chancellor, and faced the Assembly. "On behalf of Earth and all human colonies, I thank the Council for its clarity," he began, his voice measured and calm. "We have listened carefully to Ambassador Zethar's statement and the Council's demands." A wave of anticipatory murmurs swept through the hall. This was the moment when negotiations would begin, when humanity would offer concessions, perhaps agree to withdraw from some territories while petitioning to keep others. Morrison took a breath, his expression unchanged. "We decline." For a moment, the translation systems seemed to falter, as if unable to process the simplicity of the response. Then chaos erupted. "Decline? You cannot decline a council mandate," Zethar shouted. All pretense of diplomatic formality abandoned. Representatives from a dozen species were on their feet, voices raised in protest or confusion. The Centauri delegation's translator could barely keep up with their rapid vocalizations. The Altarian Medical Guild's representatives were gesturing wildly to each other with their upper limbs, while their lower appendages remained firmly planted on the floor. Through it all, Morrison stood unmoving. When the Chancellor finally managed to restore order by activating the chamber's specialized acoustic dampening fields, the human captain simply repeated his statement. "We decline the Council's demands. Humanity will continue its current development path without interference." "This is unprecedented," Zethar sputtered, his translator struggling to keep pace with his agitation. "You risk war, Captain Morrison." "We hope it does not come to that," Morrison replied evenly. "We value our trading relationships with many Council members. We have provided technological assistance, medical support, and resource-sharing arrangements that benefit numerous worlds. But we will not be contained or controlled." The Chancellor, sensing that the situation was spiraling beyond normal diplomatic channels, called for an emergency recess. As the chamber began to empty, with delegates huddled in animated discussion, Dr. Parker approached Morrison. "That went about as expected," she said quietly. Morrison nodded. "Alert Admiral Clark. Operation Closed Door begins now." Half a galaxy away, aboard the UES Constitution, Admiral Susan Clark received the encrypted transmission. Her weathered face betrayed no emotion as she processed the message. Just 2 words. They declined. Commander Ryan Hayes, her intelligence officer, stood at attention. "Orders, Admiral." "Implement Operation Closed Door immediately," she said, rising from her command chair. "Recall all commercial vessels from Council space. Cancel all pending trade agreements. Suspend all cultural and medical exchange programs." "What about the Council fleet movements?" Hayes asked. "Our intelligence reports approximately 3,000 vessels gathering at Valdorian Prime and the Chancellor's world," Clark said. "They're mobilizing, but they're not ready yet." Hayes nodded. "And our colonies? New Boston, New Terra, Kepler Prime. All of them have been preparing for this possibility for years." Clark replied. "Defense systems are already active. Industrial production has been shifted to military needs. We have a head start, Commander. Let's make it count." Throughout human space, a carefully orchestrated response began to unfold. Military vessels moved into defensive positions around major colonies. Trade ships altered course, abandoning planned stops at Council worlds. Communication channels with non-Council species lit up with increased activity, as humanity sought new partnerships beyond the established order. The true impact of humanity's decision, however, would be felt most acutely where few had anticipated, within the Council's own infrastructure. At Altarian Medical Center, the largest hospital complex in Council space, Dr. Sexalon stared in disbelief at the failing bioregeneration unit. The sophisticated device, capable of accelerating cellular regeneration across a dozen different species' physiologies, had been a marvel of human bioengineering when installed just 5 years earlier. "What do you mean, you can't fix it?" the Altarian physician demanded of the maintenance technician. "The central processor requires components only manufactured on human worlds," the technician explained. "We have replacements for most systems, but the quantum neural interfaces are beyond our capability to reproduce." "But we have 16 critical patients dependent on these units," Sexalon protested. "And all 6 units across the facility are showing the same degradation pattern," the technician added grimly. "I've checked with other medical centers. It's happening everywhere. The human-made components were designed to require replacement after exactly 5 years." Sexalon felt a cold sensation spread through his upper appendages. "Contact the Council. Tell them this is a medical emergency." Similar scenes played out across Council space. At the Centauri Mining Consortium's primary extraction facility, the advanced drilling equipment that had revolutionized asteroid mining ground to a halt. The semi-autonomous robots, designed and built by human engineers, began displaying cryptic error messages on their control panels. System maintenance required. Please contact authorized human technical representative. The mining operations manager, Velcom, slammed his fist against the control console. Override it! We have quotas to meet! Sir, we've tried, his chief engineer replied. These systems are locked down at the hardware level. Without the proper authorization codes and replacement parts, they're just expensive paperweights. The council promised this wouldn't happen, Velcom muttered. They said the humans wouldn't dare cut us off. Well, sir, the engineer said carefully, it seems they dared. Across council space, the sudden absence of human technology, expertise, and support began to create cascading problems. Systems that had been seamlessly integrated into the daily operations of countless worlds faltered or failed entirely. Medical facilities reported increased mortality rates as advanced treatment options became unavailable. Production facilities saw efficiency drop by alarming percentages. Even basic communication networks experienced periodic failures as the quantum routers designed by human engineers began to degrade without proper maintenance. Most concerning to the Council leadership, however, was the growing number of smaller member species making discreet inquiries to human representatives. The Proxima Research Institute, long dependent on human computational models, secretly reached out to establish direct relations. The Delton Agricultural Collective, whose crop yields had doubled after implementing human farming techniques, began discussions about a separate treaty. These developments did not go unnoticed. 17 days after humanity's refusal, Chancellor Thexmore called an emergency session of the Council's Inner Circle. The situation is deteriorating faster than anticipated, he announced to the assembled leaders. Our economic analysis shows a 17% reduction in overall Council productivity. Medical reports indicate increasing strain on our healthcare systems and military readiness. He paused, clearly reluctant to continue. Military Commander Zorgak of the Valdorian Defense Force rose to speak. Our fleet is experiencing significant maintenance issues. 43% of our vessels incorporate human components that require regular replacement or servicing. Without access to those components, we estimate that within 60 days, our combat effectiveness will be reduced by at least 30%. This is outrageous, Zethar exploded. How did we become so dependent on human technology? Economic advisor Veltar, a Centauri known for his analytical precision, activated a holographic display. It was not a planned dependency, Ambassador. Rather, it occurred gradually, through thousands of individual decisions made across hundreds of worlds. The display showed a web of connections, highlighting the integration of human technology throughout Council infrastructure. Human products were often more efficient, more reliable, or simply less expensive than alternatives. Veltar continued. Markets naturally gravitated toward these advantages. By the time patterns of dependency could be identified, they were already deeply entrenched. Chancellor Thexmore's 4 eyes blinked in sequence again, this time conveying profound concern rather than mere focus. The question before us is not how we arrived at this point, but how we proceed from it. The debate that followed was heated. Some advocated for immediate military action, arguing that a swift strike against key human worlds would force capitulation. Others counseled patience, suggesting that Council worlds could develop alternatives to human technology given sufficient time and resources. In the end, pragmatism prevailed. The Council could not risk open conflict when its military capabilities were compromised and declining daily. Nor could it withstand the economic and social disruption that would follow if the situation continued unaddressed. We must negotiate, Thexmore concluded, though the admission clearly pained him. Not from a position of authority, as we had intended, but as equals. The word hung in the air, alien and uncomfortable to many in the chamber. When the council reconvened in full session 3 days later, the mood was somber. Many representatives had received reports from their homeworlds about deteriorating conditions. Some had been instructed to pursue independent solutions if the council could not resolve the crisis. Chancellor Thexmore himself addressed the assembly, a rare occurrence that underscored the gravity of the moment. For 3 centuries, the Galactic Council has maintained order and stability across known space, he began. We have mediated conflicts, coordinated responses to natural disasters, and facilitated the exchange of knowledge and resources for the benefit of all member species. The chamber remained quiet, each representative acutely aware of the precipice on which they stood. Today, we face a challenge unlike any in our history, Thexmore continued. We must acknowledge that humanity has established itself as an independent force in our galaxy. Their technological prowess, their adaptability, and yes, their stubbornness, have made them essential to our shared prosperity. Murmurs rippled through the assembly, but there were few expressions of outrage now. Reality had tempered ideological positions. Therefore, I propose that we formally recognize humanity's autonomy within their current territories, withdraw our demands for their withdrawal, and invite them to establish a new relationship with the Council, not as subordinates, but as partners with equal standing. The motion was unprecedented. No species had ever been elevated from probationary status to full partnership without centuries of gradual integration. Yet, as the vote was called, member after member signaled approval. Not out of principle, perhaps, but out of necessity. When the final tally was displayed, the result was clear. The motion had passed by a significant margin. Chancellor Thexmore, looking both relieved and apprehensive, activated the communication link to the human delegation, who had not attended the session. Captain Morrison's face appeared on the chamber's main display. He listened impassively as Thexmore explained the Council's decision and extended the formal invitation for a new partnership. When the Chancellor finished speaking, Morrison's expression remained unchanged. Chancellor, we appreciate the Council's reconsideration of its position. Hope flickered across many faces in the chamber. This was the moment when normalcy would begin to return, when the crisis would start to abate. However, Morrison continued, we must decline the invitation to negotiate at this time. The chamber erupted once more, this time in disbelief rather than anger. Chancellor Thexmore raised all 4 hands for silence, his composure visibly strained. Captain Morrison, perhaps I was unclear. We are offering humanity full partnership status, equal representation, and recognition of your territorial claims. What more could you possibly want? Chancellor, the issue is not what we want, but how we achieve it, Morrison replied. The Council has demonstrated that it views negotiation as a tool for maintaining control, not as a means of establishing genuine cooperation. We believe direct bilateral agreements with individual worlds and species will better serve everyone's interests. This is outrageous, Zethar interjected. You would destroy 3 centuries of stability for your own advantage. On the contrary, Ambassador, Morrison said calmly, we are offering a new kind of stability, one based on mutual respect and voluntary cooperation, rather than centralized authority. Before further protests could be raised, Morrison ended the transmission. The council chamber descended into chaos, with representatives shouting over one another, some rising to leave in protest, others huddling with allies to discuss next steps. Chancellor Thexmore watched helplessly as the carefully constructed order he had spent his career maintaining began to unravel before his eyes. Over the following weeks, the fragmentation of the council accelerated. The Altarian Medical Guild was the first to formally withdraw, announcing a direct treaty with humanity that would restore medical technology and training exchanges. The Corvin Trade Federation and Centauri Mining Consortium followed soon after, prioritizing economic recovery over Council solidarity. By the 60th day, after humanity's initial refusal, 17 former Council members had established independent relations with human worlds. The remaining members struggled to reorganize their infrastructure without human technology. But progress was slow, and public discontent was growing. Meanwhile, humanity continued its expansion. Titan Station, the massive construction platform orbiting Saturn, launched 3 new colony ships each month, carrying settlers to worlds beyond Council space. 11 other major stations across human territory operated at full capacity, producing vessels, habitation modules, and industrial equipment. On the 91st day, Chancellor Thexmore resigned his position, acknowledging that the Council, as it had existed for 3 centuries, was no longer viable. In his place, a transitional leadership committee was formed, tasked with reimagining the Council's role in a fundamentally altered galaxy. Captain Morrison, now elevated to Diplomatic Coordinator for Human Space, addressed an assembly of representatives from both former Council worlds and human colonies. The event was broadcast across thousands of inhabited planets, marking the formal end of one era and the beginning of another. For too long, cooperation in our galaxy has been defined by submission to a central authority, Morrison said. Today, we propose a different model, one based on equal partnership, mutual benefit, and respect for the unique contributions of each civilization. The new framework, which would become known as the Liberty Alliance, established principles for technological exchange, territorial development, and conflict resolution that emphasized voluntary participation rather than mandatory compliance. In the heart of what had once been Council space, the former Chancellor Thexmore watched the broadcast from his private quarters. An aide entered, bearing a communication device. "Excellence, you have a message from Diplomatic Coordinator Morrison." Thexmore took the device reluctantly. What could he possibly want now? "He is requesting your expertise. Excellence. The Transitional Committee has invited you to serve as an advisor on incorporating traditional Council practices into the new alliance structure." Thexmore's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession. Surprise, not focus or concern. "They want my help?" "Yes, Excellence. They believe your experience is valuable." After a long moment, Thexmore nodded. "Tell them I will consider their offer." As the aide departed, Thexmore turned back to the window, gazing out at the stars. The galaxy had changed irrevocably because of 2 simple words: "We decline." Yet perhaps in that change lay opportunities he had not yet imagined. 1 year after humanity's fateful refusal, the galaxy had transformed. The Council, once 47 members strong, had dwindled to 29. Its authority was greatly diminished, its mandates now seen as suggestions rather than commands. In its place, a network of bilateral and multilateral agreements connected worlds across known space, with humanity serving as the hub for many of these relationships. Admiral Clark, reviewing fleet deployments from her command center on New Terra, received a priority communication from Earth Central Command. "Admiral, the Valdorian High Command has requested technical assistance with their navigation systems." The message read, "They're offering trade concessions in the Orion sector in exchange." Clark allowed herself a small smile. "Approve the request. Send our best engineers." Commander Hayes looked up from his station. "They're coming around, one by one." "They don't have much choice," Clark replied. "But that's not why we're helping them." No. We're helping because that's what partners do, and that's the difference they never understood. Across the galaxy, a transformation was underway, not through conquest or coercion, but through the power of refusal and the promise of a more equitable future. At the newly established diplomatic hub on Europa, Dr. Lisa Parker oversaw the transfer of medical technology to representatives from 12 former Council worlds. The advanced bioregeneration units, now improved with additional features, would save countless lives across multiple species. Dr. Parker, the Altarian medical representative, approached her. These units are more advanced than the ones we had before. Yes, Parker nodded. We've been continuing our research. These models are 30% more efficient and can adapt to a wider range of physiologies. Yet you share them freely, the Altarian observed. Not freely, Parker corrected. There's a cost, but it's a fair one, negotiated directly between our worlds without intermediaries taking their cut. The Altarian's color shifted in what Parker had learned to recognize as their equivalent of thoughtful contemplation. Perhaps the Council's control was more costly than we realized. In the former Council chamber, now repurposed as the Forum for Interstellar Cooperation, representatives from over 60 worlds, including former Council members, human colonies, and previously unaffiliated species, gathered to discuss collaborative approaches to galactic challenges. Ambassador Zethar, his influence greatly diminished but his position retained, watched the proceedings with mixed emotions. Beside him sat a younger Valdorian diplomat, recently appointed to liaise with the human diplomatic corps. I still don't understand how they did it, Zethar murmured. How could a simple refusal bring down 3 centuries of established order? Perhaps, the younger diplomat suggested. It wasn't as stable as we believed. A truly stable system should be able to withstand challenge and adapt to change. Zethar glanced sharply at his compatriot, about to deliver a rebuke, but stopped himself. The galaxy had changed. Perhaps it was time his thinking changed as well. Across human space, expansion continued at an unprecedented rate. New colonies flourished. Research outposts pushed the boundaries of knowledge, and trade networks extended to regions the Council had never explored. The freedom from external constraints had unleashed human creativity and ambition in ways that benefited not only humanity, but all species willing to engage as partners rather than subordinates. On Earth, in the historic chambers of the Global Governance Assembly, Captain Morrison, now elevated to Director of Interstellar Relations, addressed the representatives of humanity's homeworld. 1 year ago, we made a choice that changed the course of galactic history, he began. We chose independence over submission, direct cooperation over centralized control, and equal partnership over hierarchical authority. The assembly hall was silent, every representative focused on his words. That choice was not without risk. We faced the possibility of military conflict, economic isolation, and diplomatic exclusion. But we understood something fundamental that the Council had forgotten. True cooperation cannot be compelled. It must be chosen freely by all participants. Morrison paused, letting his gaze sweep across the chamber. Today, we stand at the center of a new network of relationships that spans the galaxy. Not because we conquered or coerced, but because we offered an alternative to the old order, an alternative based on respect, reciprocity, and recognition of each civilization's unique value. A wave of applause swept through the chamber, representatives rising to their feet in acknowledgement of what had been achieved. But our work is far from complete, Morrison continued when the ovation subsided. Many worlds still struggle with the transition. Some cling to the familiar structures of the past, out of fear of the unknown. Our responsibility now is to demonstrate through our actions that this new path leads to greater prosperity and security for all. The Assembly approved increased funding for technological sharing initiatives, medical assistance programs, and diplomatic outreach efforts. Earth's resources would be dedicated not to dominance, but to partnership, a strategy that had already proven more effective than centuries of Council mandates. As the session concluded, Morrison was approached by Dr. Parker, who had returned from her mission to Europa. "Congratulations, Director," she said with a smile. "It seems your gamble paid off." "Our gamble," Morrison corrected her. "And it wasn't really a gamble. It was a calculation based on what we knew about the Council's dependencies and our own capabilities. Still, to bring down a 300-year-old institution with just 2 words, Parker marveled. That's something for the history books. The words themselves weren't important, Morrison replied thoughtfully. It was what they represented. The realization that we didn't need the Council's approval or permission to chart our own course. Once we understood that, everything else followed naturally. As they walked together through the assembly building, their conversation turned to the future. New worlds to explore, new civilizations to meet, new challenges to overcome. The galaxy had entered a new era, one defined not by the centralized authority of the Council, but by the voluntary cooperation of diverse species, each contributing their unique strengths to shared endeavors. In the depths of space, beyond the former boundaries of Council territory, human colony ships continued their journey outward, carrying with them not just the hopes and dreams of their passengers, but a new model for interstellar relations. One that had begun with a simple refusal to accept the old order. The quantum communication network that now connected hundreds of worlds across the galaxy hummed with constant activity. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges, scientific collaborations, and diplomatic discussions flowed through channels that bypassed the former Council's cumbersome bureaucracy. On the colony world of New Boston, Governor Eliza Chen watched as a delegation from the Proxima Research Institute toured the planet's advanced manufacturing facilities. The Proximan scientists, with their crystalline sensory organs and methodical movement patterns, examined human production techniques with evident fascination. Your adaptive fabrication systems are remarkable, the lead researcher commented. They achieve efficiency levels our own factories have never approached. We're happy to share the technology, Governor Chen replied. Our engineers can work with your team to adapt the systems to your specific needs. Under the Council, such an exchange would have required years of applications, reviews, and approvals, the Proximan noted, and likely would have been denied in the end. That's the difference between control and cooperation, Chen said. We all advance faster when knowledge flows freely. After the tour concluded, and the visitors departed for their next destination, Chen received a priority communication from Earth. Director Morrison's face appeared on the secure channel. Governor, I wanted to inform you personally. The former Chancellor Thexmore has accepted our invitation. He'll be arriving on New Boston next month to observe our integration programs firsthand. Chen raised an eyebrow. The architect of the Council system wants to see how we're dismantling it. Not dismantling, Morrison corrected. Transforming. Thexmore is a pragmatist at heart. He's seen how our approach has produced results where the Council's methods failed. He wants to understand why. And what do we gain from his visit? Perspective, Morrison replied. And legitimacy in the eyes of those species still hesitant to break from tradition. Thexmore's endorsement, even a tacit one, would carry significant weight. Chen nodded thoughtfully. I'll ensure he receives full access and honest answers. That's all we need, Morrison said. The results speak for themselves. When the communication ended, Chen turned to the window of her office, looking out over the sprawling city that had grown from a modest settlement to a thriving metropolis in just a few decades. Human ingenuity, freed from external constraints, had accomplished what generations of Council oversight could not: rapid, sustainable development that improved lives across species boundaries. In the former Council archives, a special committee worked diligently to preserve the knowledge accumulated over 3 centuries while making it accessible to all interested civilizations. The vast repository of scientific data, historical records, and cultural artifacts had previously been restricted to authorized Council representatives. Now, scholars from across the galaxy could access these treasures directly. Saren Velk, once a junior archivist under the Council regime, and now the director of the new Open Knowledge Initiative, guided a group of human researchers through the collection. Much of this material was classified under arbitrary security protocols, Velk explained, not because it contained sensitive information, but because knowledge was seen as a resource to be controlled. Like technology, one of the researchers observed. Exactly, Velk agreed. The council believed that managing access to knowledge and technology was necessary for maintaining stability, but in practice, it created artificial scarcity that benefited the founding species at the expense of newer members. The researchers examined ancient star charts, biological catalogs of extinct species, and technical schematics for technologies long abandoned. With each discovery, connections were made to ongoing research projects across human space and beyond. We've established data-sharing protocols with 17 research institutions on different worlds, Velk continued. Information that once took years to approve for release now flows freely between scientists, engineers, and scholars of all species. And has it created the instability the council feared? The lead researcher asked. Velk's facial appendages rippled in what the humans had learned to recognize as amusement. On the contrary, collaborative research has accelerated technological development while establishing new bonds between civilizations. We're solving problems together that none of us could have addressed alone. As humanity's influence expanded, not all developments were immediately positive. Some former council worlds, particularly those most heavily invested in the old system, struggled to adapt to the new reality. Trade routes shifted, economic relationships realigned, and political structures evolved, sometimes painfully. On Valdorian Prime, civil unrest erupted when the planetary government announced cuts to public services due to reduced revenue. The Valdorian leadership, long accustomed to the privileges of being a founding council member, had been slow to establish direct agreements with human worlds or other former members. Ambassador Zethar, returning to his homeworld after years as a council representative, found himself facing angry crowds outside the planetary administration complex. "You promised the council would protect our interests," one protester shouted. "Now our medical centers lack supplies, our industries falter, and our ships lie idle in orbit." Zethar, humbled by recent events, did not respond with the dismissive arrogance that had once been his trademark. Instead, he addressed the gathering directly. "I believe the council system was the only path to stability and prosperity," he admitted. "I was wrong. Our leaders were wrong. We clung to an outdated model of galactic governance because it served our interests, not because it was best for all species." The crowd grew quieter, surprised by this unexpected candor. "But we can change course," Zethar continued. "I have seen how direct cooperation with humanity and other worlds has benefited those who embraced it. It is not too late for Valdoria to join this new network of relationships." Later that day, in a closed session with the Planetary Leadership Council, Zethar presented a comprehensive proposal for establishing diplomatic and economic ties with key human colonies and former council members. "We have two choices," he told the assembled leaders. "We can continue to isolate ourselves in protest of a change we cannot reverse, watching as our world declines, or we can adapt to the new reality and find our place within it." The debate was heated, with many older leaders resistant to what they saw as capitulation to human influence. But economic realities proved persuasive. Within a week, Valdorian diplomatic missions departed for Earth, New Terra, and Kepler Prime to initiate discussions on technology exchange, trade agreements, and cultural cooperation. Throughout all these developments, the human military maintained its vigilance. Admiral Clark, reviewing defense posture assessments aboard the UES Constitution, received regular intelligence updates on potential threats from holdout council factions or opportunistic non-aligned species. "The transition has been remarkably peaceful overall," Commander Hayes noted during one such briefing. "But there are still elements resistant to change." "Peace through strength, Commander," Clark replied. Our readiness to defend ourselves and our allies has prevented many potential conflicts from materializing. And the new defense pact with the Outer Rim worlds? Proceeding as planned. Joint exercises begin next month. We're creating a security framework based on mutual commitment rather than imposed compliance. Hayes nodded thoughtfully. I never expected to see such fundamental change in my lifetime. Few did, Clark acknowledged. But that's the nature of transformative moments in history. They're only obvious in retrospect. As the second anniversary of humanity's refusal approached, preparations began for a galactic summit on Earth, the first such gathering not held under Council auspices. Representatives from over 80 worlds, including former Council members, human colonies, and previously unaffiliated species, would converge to formalize the new cooperative framework that had emerged from the ashes of the old order. Director Morrison, reviewing the summit agenda with his staff, emphasized the symbolic importance of the event. This isn't about replacing the Council with a human-centric system, he stressed. It's about establishing a new paradigm of interstellar relations based on equal partnership and mutual respect. Dr. Parker, now serving as Director of Interspecies Medical Cooperation, added her perspective. The medical collaboration networks we've established have already saved millions of lives across dozens of species. That's the kind of concrete benefit that builds trust and goodwill. And trust, Morrison nodded, is the foundation of everything we're building. When the summit convened in the purpose-built Galactic Cooperation Center outside Geneva, the atmosphere was one of cautious optimism. Many delegates arrived with specific concerns or requests, but all shared a recognition that the old system had failed and a new approach was necessary. Former Chancellor Thexmore, attending as an observer rather than a representative, watched the proceedings with evident fascination. During a break in the formal sessions, he found himself in conversation with Director Morrison. I must confess, Thexmore said, his four eyes blinking in rapid sequence. I did not expect this outcome when you first refused our demands. What did you expect? Morrison asked. War, perhaps, or economic collapse. Certainly not. This. Thexmore gestured to the diverse gathering of species engaged in animated discussion throughout the hall. Not a new order emerging so quickly from the old. The seeds were already there, Morrison replied. Many worlds chafed under Council restrictions, but saw no alternative. We simply demonstrated that another path was possible. By refusing to negotiate, Thexmore noted with a hint of irony. By refusing to negotiate under coercion, Morrison corrected. True negotiation requires equals at the table, each with the freedom to walk away if the terms aren't acceptable. The Council never offered that option. Thexmore was silent for a moment, processing this perspective. Your approach has proven effective. I cannot deny it. But I wonder, what happens when humanity's interests conflict with those of your new partners? Will you maintain your principles of equality then? That's the test of any system, Morrison acknowledged. Not how it functions when interests align, but how it resolves conflicts when they don't. We've established dispute resolution mechanisms that don't rely on centralized authority, but on mutually agreed principles and third-party mediation. An interesting experiment, Thexmore said. I hope to live long enough to see if it endures. So do I, Morrison replied with genuine feeling. Because the alternative, a return to imposed order, would benefit no one. As the summit progressed, agreements were reached on interstellar navigation protocols, scientific data sharing, emergency response coordination, and dozens of other issues that had previously fallen under Council jurisdiction. Without the cumbersome bureaucracy and political maneuvering that had characterized Council deliberations, solutions emerged more rapidly and with broader support. On the final day, the assembled representatives signed the Earth Accords, a framework document establishing the principles of the new interstellar order. Unlike the Council Charter, which had set out strict hierarchies and compliance requirements, The accords emphasized voluntary cooperation, respect for sovereignty, and collective problem-solving. As the ceremony concluded, Dr. Parker found herself standing beside a Centauri mining executive she recognized from earlier negotiations. "It seems we've witnessed the birth of a new era," the Centauri observed. "One with tremendous potential," Parker agreed. "But potential requires nurturing to be realized." "Indeed. And trust requires maintenance." The Centauri's crystalline eyes reflected the lights of the chamber. "We trusted the Council for centuries, only to discover how brittle that system truly was." "The difference," Parker suggested, "is that the Council demanded trust without reciprocity. What we're building now is based on mutual investment and shared benefit." "A more resilient foundation," the Centauri nodded. "Time will tell if it's also more durable." As delegates departed Earth for their respective worlds, carrying with them the agreements, protocols, and partnerships established during the summit, a sense of possibility permeated the galaxy that had been absent under Council rule. Species that had been relegated to the margins found themselves engaged as full participants in shaping collective futures. Technologies once restricted flowed more freely, accelerating development across multiple civilizations. In the observatory atop the Galactic Cooperation Center, Director Morrison stood alone, gazing at the stars, visible through the transparent dome. So many worlds, so many possibilities, and now, a new path forward for all of them. Admiral Clark joined him, her uniform impeccable as always despite the late hour. "The last delegations have departed. By all accounts, the summit was a success." "A beginning," Morrison corrected. "The real work continues on thousands of worlds across the galaxy. Work that wouldn't be possible if we hadn't taken our stand 2 years ago," Clark noted. Morrison nodded. "A simple refusal that changed everything." "Not so simple," Clark countered. "It was backed by years of preparation, strategic positioning, and careful assessment of Council dependencies. We knew exactly what we were doing when we declined their ultimatum." "True," Morrison acknowledged. "But the principle itself was simple. We would not be controlled. That clarity made everything else possible." They stood in companionable silence, contemplating the vast expanse beyond Earth and the new connections that now linked humanity to civilizations circling distant suns. The Galactic Council, once the unquestioned authority governing interstellar affairs, had become a diminished body, still existing, but increasingly irrelevant as direct relationships flourished between worlds. "I received word from New Boston," Clark said after a time. "The Valdorian delegation has arrived to finalize their technology exchange agreement." "Zethar?" "Leading the delegation personally. Apparently, he's become quite the advocate for the new system." Morrison smiled slightly. "People can surprise you." "Some more than others," Clark agreed. "The question now is, what's next? We've transformed the galactic order. Where do we go from here?" Morrison turned from the stars to face his longtime colleague. "Outward. Always outward. There are regions beyond former Council space that no one has properly explored. Civilizations we haven't encountered. Challenges we haven't imagined." "And opportunities," Clark added. "Exactly. But this time, we go forward not as conquerors or isolated wanderers, but as part of a network of mutual support and shared discovery." As they descended from the observatory, the quantum communication system alerted Morrison to an incoming message, a request from a previously unknown species at the edge of charted space, seeking contact with a civilization that had transformed the galactic order. The message was brief, but profound. "We have observed your interactions with the former Council worlds. We wish to learn more about your approach to cooperation without domination." Morrison smiled as he read it. 2 years ago, humanity had declined an ultimatum. Now, that refusal had opened doors across the galaxy, including some they hadn't known existed. "Admiral," he said, "I believe our next destination has just revealed itself. Together, They moved toward the communication center to respond to this newest opportunity. One more step in humanity's journey from council subordinate to galactic partner. A journey that had begun with a simple, powerful refusal. As the stars wheeled overhead and quantum signals carried messages between worlds, once divided by council politics, the new galactic order continued to take shape, built not on mandates from above, but on connections forged between equals, each choosing freely to participate in a shared future limited only by imagination and the boundless possibilities of cooperation without coercion. The legacy of humanity's refusal would echo through generations to come, a testament to the power of declining to accept limitations imposed by others and choosing instead to forge a new path, not alone, but in the company of all who shared the vision of a galaxy united not by authority but by choice.